Today I want to talk a bit more about actual combat tactics. These are not game specific, so you can use them in any game you want, or even in real life if you ever find yourself fighting off an invading species of demons or whatever. The first thing you should keep in mind is that combat should be your last resort, not your first option to solve any problem. If you're playing a very heroic game, where the characters are tough and hard to kill like D&D 5e, you lose the feeling how dangerous combat can be. But if you ever played a game where the characters can die very quickly, like an OSR for example, or Call of Cthulhu, you will find that your player's natural will try to avoid combat wherever possible. In the earliest days of D&D, you didn't get any experience for combat, you only got experience for the gold you carried with you out of the dungeon. So fighting and combat was contrary to that goal. It is dangerous and it uses up your resources. So you would try getting around the combat wherever possible. Sneaking by, avoiding dangerous areas, luring enemies into traps, whatever works. So wherever possible, try to solve your conflicts and problems without resorting to violence. Try the test methods of diplomacy, talking your way out of trouble. Try sneaking around your enemies, using stealth to avoid them. Or avoid your enemies altogether, go around them. But when combat is unavoidable, you should make sure that the odds are stacked heavily in your favor. A fair fight is for fools and dead people. To achieve this goal, you first have to know your enemy as you know yourself, like Sun Tzu said. Art of War is a great book. The general principles in there can be applied to almost any conflict, really. Doesn't matter which time period, which way war is fought, or if it even is a corporate war and pencils and checkbooks are your weapons. The principles are so general they can be applied anywhere. So, know yourself. You should know the strength and weaknesses of your character and of your group of characters. You should know who plays what role, what everyone should be doing in combat, so that there are no questions to be asked, that no one hesitates when it comes to acting out that combat. This way you can play to each character's strength and make up for each character's weaknesses. There are some very general things you have to look out for. Who's a good close combatant, who can hold their own face to face with the enemy? Who's good at ranged combat? Who's good at magic, who can keep the others safe from magic? And who shouldn't go in close combat? Who should take cover in ranged combat? And so forth. Now, if you know yourself, you should take steps to know the capabilities of your enemy. There are several ways to go about this, depending on what sources of information you have. If you don't have a lot of time to prepare, try using stealth. Sneak closer to your enemy and observe them. See what they look like, what weapons and armor and equipment they have, how many they are, what they are doing, and then try estimating what their capabilities are and use that in your planning. If you have more time to prepare, you should use every avenue available to you to gather information. Ask around your enemy. Maybe someone knows them. Maybe there's an ex-gang member that can tell you how they operate. Maybe there's information on the net. If you got some form of divination magic, you can use that to scout on your enemy. Use your crystal balls, send out your familiars, look into the future and the past and gather information that way. Use small spy drones or invisible summoned spirits to look what your enemies are up to. Keep eyes on them even while you approach them. Maybe you even want to plan this really long term. Send a spy into the midst of your enemies. An undercover agent gathering as much information as possible. You want their supply chains, routes, secret passwords, patrol habits, security details, whatever you can get. Now, this information you can use to apply your strength where the enemy has weaknesses. And the first principle you should be looking for is to fight your enemy where he is not. Usually your goal is not killing the enemy, and not directly at least, unless your quest is to slay the dragon. But usually you want to stop them from achieving something, or you need an object that they have, or you need to rescue a hostage. So if you know where the enemy is, you can try getting around the enemy and destroy whatever you need to destroy, steal whatever you need to steal. And because the enemy is not there, he won't be able to resist. When you still have to fight the enemy, you should make sure to decimate the enemy's ability to fight back by any means necessary. You can use magic to control the enemy, confuse them, blind them, stun them, paralyze them, polymorph them, any way to take them out of the fight. In a modern day setting, you can use gas grenade, smoke bombs, night vision goggles, stunners, EMP grenades, hacking to impair the enemy's vision and destroy their weapons and equipment. You can lay an ambush and spring onto enemies, attacking them from all sides. You can sneak up to them, taking them out one by one without them ever knowing. And when the alarm sounds, hopefully you have reduced their numbers well enough to be able to take the rest. You really should never have to fight a fair fight. If you do your preparations right, you should have every advantage against the enemy possible. Numerical advantage, for example. You should have 3 of your guys against 1 of the enemies. You should take steps to get this numerical superiority. You should divide your enemies. Make them patrol areas where you're not. Make them defend areas where you're not going to attack. And then strike somewhere else where they are weaker. You can use spells like a wall of fire to separate the enemy group into 2 smaller groups and then fight them one after the other. You can use fireballs and grenades to disrupt the enemy formation and then with your formation pick up the isolated groups of enemies you encounter. If you ever get into a fair fight, or worse yet, if the enemy has the upper hand, retreat should be your first priority. Live to fight another day. Again, use what methods to have to diminish the enemy's ability to offend you. Use the cover of smoke grenades. Use magic darkness to rob them of their vision. Teleport away if you can. Instead of fighting every enemy, look where their weakest point is and break through there with force and then get the hell out of there. You should always have an escape route open to you. So either you know the terrain, you know where you can quickly traverse it, where you can hide, where you can set an ambush yourself. Maybe you can prepare traps, ditches, bear traps, explosive runes on the floor beforehand, before engaging the enemy, and then use that as you retreat to slow down the enemy. If you're really good at this stealth game, if your characters are really sneaky, if you have magic for invisibility, if you have chameleon technology sneak suits, you can really focus on this kind of guerrilla warfare. You can strike enemy patrols that are smaller than your own group. You can disrupt the enemy supply chain, making them waste resources, manpower and guards to make sure you don't raid their supply chain anymore. And then they have less guards, less men to guard the other operations. Maybe that is the distraction you need to be able to assault the enemy's main camp. Tag them and make them chase you into prepared ambushes, into traps, into spiked pits. Never engage them in open combat. Always retreat when the odds don't favor you. Movement is an important part in combat and warfare, and if you can improve your own ability to move around and hamper the enemy's ability, it will be a great advantage. You can use terrain and knowledge of terrain to facilitate this. Maybe just knowing where to go, know the good routes, the back alleys, the loose boards and fences you can pass through, the bogs you need to avoid, the quicksand, the short routes. But this can also apply to your preparation and your gear. Maybe you've got dog sleds, skis to go around in a snowy environment. Maybe you got scuba gear, potions of water breathing to escape underwater. Maybe you got flying carpets or helicopters to get around fast. And if your enemy has any of those abilities available to them, sabotage them. Put sugar in their gasoline. Put explosives in their fuel supply. Punctuate their tires. Cut their horses loose and let them escape. Destroy their bridges and block their waterways so the enemy cannot move around freely, giving you the ability to outmaneuver your enemy. Whenever possible, you should strike at the enemy's head. It will frighten them, making them likely to make mistakes and put too much effort in guarding the head. That could be the literal head of your enemy if you are fighting a single creature or a person. It could also be a figurative head. It could be the enemy CEO or general. If you take steps to snipe for that enemy using long-range weapons or magic, if you take steps to send assassins to poison him, he will take steps to tighten his security and maybe over-proportional to the actual threats, making him waste resources again. Resources that will leave shortages in other areas, weaknesses for you to exploit. And if you manage to hit the enemy's head, literal or figuratively, it will usually have critical results. Defeating the enemy with one blow, or at least confusing them, stunning them. A human will literally be stumped on the ground, maybe he has to wipe the blood out of his face, but an organization will take a huge blow to its chain of command. If they don't fall apart immediately without the leader of the group, there might be temporary confusion while they restructure the command chain. There might even be infighting within the group while they try to establish the new command structure. You can use these chaos to achieve your actual goal, strike where the enemy is weak, attack the enemy where he is not. You might even use this lack of leadership to insert yourself as the new leaders of the group. With all that, you should always keep in mind why you are actually fighting the enemy. What is your goal? Don't get caught up in the fighting itself and trying to defeat your enemy. Always keep your actual goal in mind. Is it to get an object? Is it to rescue a person? Is it to disrupt the enemy's operations? Maybe you just want to scare them off, make them leave the area, make them leave your country. There really is no point in overachieving here. If you are putting more resources into this fighting than you have to, if you waste men and ammunition on enemies that are already withdrawing, you will lack these resources later on and have weaknesses yourself. Keep in mind, while stacking every advantage you have against your enemy, you should leave them a chance to escape. Unless you really don't want them to escape. But what this does is it gives them the option to break and run, and they won't be forced to stay and fight till the bitter end. You will lose a lot of resources, manpower, while trying to beat the enemy into submission that can't retreat. If the enemy is retreating, if they are routing, those are enemies you don't have to fight anymore, or you can pick them off at a later date when they are unorganized and not ready to fight. You can harass your retreating enemies with fast attacks, diminishing their ability to regroup. You should always try to surprise your enemy, to attack when he least expects it. An attack even from stealth, an ambush, will always be more effective if the enemy does not see it coming at all, if they are not in their armor, if they are not in their tanks, if they are not carrying their weapons, if their combat spells are not prepared. So always attack Brits between 5 and 7 p.m. and on free weekends double your attacks. Attack them where they do not expect attacks, where they think they are in a safe area. Use your ability to move around to attack them in places where they don't think it's possible and at times where they don't think it's possible. Attack at night when the enemy thinks you don't see him and no one can attack him. Attack him in the middle of his stronghold, if you can. Let your enemy who's expecting an attack wait for that attack. Make him wait minutes, hours, days, until he loses his cool, he gets frustrated and lowers his guard, until the soldiers just have to take a break, have to rest and lower their guard. If you can, take away the enemy's ability to rest and recover. Poison their wells. Make a lot of noise at night so they can't sleep. Make a habit of always attacking at different times so they never know when you attack, so they always have to be on guard. Take away their medical supplies. Snipe their healers. Cut their electricity. Cut their internet. Take away their sources of water, food, magic. Take away their shelter. Burn their tents. Infest their homes with summoned rats and cockroaches so they don't want to go back there. Or just throw a really nasty stink bomb in there. If your enemy is not rested, if he is tired and exhausted, that not only diminishes his ability to fight, but he is also more likely to make critical mistakes. That is all I have for today. Maybe I'll do a follow-up video if I think of any more brilliant combat strategies. In the meantime, what are your best tips for combat? What are your best strategies? Maybe you have a story of a hard-fought victory you achieved by guile and cunning rather than outright combat prowess. Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching and goodbye.